chapter, the British chapter, the other chapters. The head of the German Red Cross during the Second World War was an SS doctor who was doing, human experiments on concentration camp inmates. The Red Cross knew a lot about horrible things happening in Germany. They didn't say anything about it, ever, because they didn't want to disrupt their relations with Germany, which were very important. And some of that was, well, they were like surrounded by Germany at that point, Switzerland was, so they had their own selfish reasons. But I think they also thought, the work of the Red Cross is so important, we must not allow anything like genocide to distract us from our important work. It's really a disgusting organization. It's ludicrous that, people say like, ooh, you're in fact, ooh, great, I mean, we had prisoners of war in North Vietnam, right? And they were tortured, right? And we all know this. Did the Red Cross do anything for them? No, of course not. Did nothing for them, right? There's this Israeli soldier who's being held in Gaza by Hamas, right? I mean, you're not supposed to hold soldiers in as kidnapped victims, right? We all agree on this, right? Well, no, but it's okay because the Hamas people are terrorists, so let's not make a fuss about that. Because, that'd be bad PR for the International Red Cross. They just let that slide. I mean, what they like to do is attack America because then they get a lot of applause at the UN. I mean, I'm not even saying we should stop contributing money to them, although we should. But why do we have to treat them as they are moral arbiters of the world? They're just a bunch of, self-seeking Swiss bureaucrats. They're nothing to us, really. I mean, that they would give us advice on, what is a proper way of conducting a war. When have you fought a war? I mean, what is your experience of this? What are you talking about? You're beneficiaries of other people's fighting. I'm sorry, other people's interrogations, too. And then you're telling us, oh, that'd be wrong because, that just would be wrong. We never do that unless there's, well, we don't. Sorry, did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, someone asked me a hard question. Sir.
First of all, thanks for recognizing the Irish.
The Irish have, there's that book, How the Irish Saved Civilization.
Yes.
They're still trying.
I noticed after the vote in Ireland, and I suspect probably in France and the Netherlands, if you pay attention to the political class, they essentially said, well, we don't care what the results are.
Yes, this was really shocking.
Yeah.
And I have to say, this really makes me think less of Europeans, which was not easy to push me lower down than I already was. But, I do not believe that could happen in America. The American people are distracted. They're often confused. They're a little bit goofy. They're like, what about the black helicopters? They're like, oh, but I don't believe it could happen in America that, there's a direct vote. And then the government said, well, no, there was a vote, but that was just a vote. That's not anything that we have to pay attention to because they were just voters. I don't think that could happen in America. At least I don't believe that could happen in America without just endless shrieking and screaming and people, whenever the president shows up saying, lie, lie, you lie. It only happened once over health care. Right, because it's complicated. But if there had been a referendum and people said no, and the president said by no, I think you must have meant yes. I just don't think he'd be allowed to appear in public. No, really. I think that we have this sense that you can't do this to us. We're Americans, and it's kind of sad they do not have that sense in Europe. They think, well, of course you can do it to us because we're Europeans, and people are always rolling over us. We understand that. And I have to say, I get it that the Dutch are that way, because they are that way. And the French probably have talked themselves into some cynical explanation of, well, they're just saying that they don't accept what we said. But of course, we said it knowing that they would say that, so we didn't really say it either. And actually, let's have a drink, The French have probably figured out some version of this which isn't humiliating because they're so clever. The Irish, they used to get angry. Why aren't they having fistfights? Why aren't they breaking windows? They're taking this rather tamely for people who, if I may say so, were pioneers of direct action, Well, let's be fair. The Irish government has said, okay, no is no. What's your next offer? They kind of, and they also put it to a vote, which they get a lot of credit for. The lesson that everyone else learned was don't put it to a vote. That will just excite people and confuse them. They'll think they have some say over this, which that can't be. So the Irish deserve credit for doing this. Everyone in Europe told them not to, and they did. Of course, they did say to everyone in Europe, these are our voters. We know how to handle them. Don't worry. You know. And what's interesting in all these countries is really interesting. They didn't have much of a debate. And the reason they didn't have much of a debate is that you cannot find anybody in any of these governments who is a Eurosceptic. Maybe they are privately, but they're in public. I mean, this was an amazing thing. Like, there's no major newspaper in the Netherlands. There was no major newspaper in France that was against the treaty. And there were no, you know, like respectable mainstream politicians that were against it. So all the kind of respected voices were on the other side, and then the country said no. And I forget how that goes in Dutch, but it's, you know, niet or something, whatever it is, niet. Neen. But, okay, so Europeans, it's like they live this underground life, you know, in which they accept that, well, okay, these are the only possible newspapers, so I'll continue subscribing. You know, these are the only possible politicians, I continue voting for them. But in my heart, I'm secretly resisting. You know, I'm secretly having a different view. And if they would ever let me vote, I would say so. I wouldn't insist on it, but I would sneak off and say no. Like, don't they feel a little ashamed? I mean, don't they feel like a little bit embarrassed? Apparently not. I know. So they deserve the EU. But we don't deserve it. Was there? Yes, sir.
Well, so currently Obama is pushing...
I'm listening to you totally. I'm just getting myself on...
17 other treaties that have been languishing.
Yes.
Pushing now to have ratified.
Yes.
What do you think is going to happen? And also talk about the mechanism by which they want to have these ratified with a majority rather than a 2/3 in the Senate.
You know, not only are Americans better than Europeans, I mean, in this way, I mean, maybe they're not as musical or something, but I mean, not only are we better about saying you can't do this to us because we're Americans, even senators are better than Europeans. Let me say, our parliamentarians are better than theirs. I mean, because the whole trajectory of the EU has been, why bother with national parliaments? They just get in the way, right? This statistic that you were citing, about 60% of their laws come from... Okay, what that means is you're sucking all this authority away from the British Parliament. Now, why aren't the members of Parliament screaming? Well, because it wouldn't be polite. They don't like to be impolite. Okay. Senators, I don't believe, are going to accept that. You know, I used to have a veto, and the president used to have to call me up and wheedle and bargain and get me, you know, tickets to the World Series, something. No, stuff from my state, you know, I'll just give it up now because it would be selfish of me to hold on to this really powerful thing that I have, this vote that the president really needs. Don't believe it. Absolutely do not believe it. And let me just say, this is kind of slight inside baseball, but this doctrine that, oh, you don't actually need to have 2/3 of the Senate, that's just what it says in the Constitution, but that's just the like public constitution. But really, this doctrine goes back to at least 1945. There was a prominent article in the Yale Law Journal making this argument, and it has only one thing going for it, which is we have done trade agreements this way. And there's a complicated argument for why we have. But the fact is, this argument has been out there for 65 years now, you know. Is anyone buying on? No, nobody. And they're not buying because it's basically saying to, how many is that, 26 senators? Why don't you just give up your, you know, extra power, right? Because now they're saying, hey, you could pass it with 50 instead of 67. Those 26, and of course everyone understands this. It's the minority party that's being shafted. I don't believe that even the Democrats have the nerve to do that. And by the way, I don't believe, I could be naive, you know, I mean, but there'll be a big fight about it. And I don't think, you can count on the Supreme Court saying, oh, you want to rewrite the Constitution? That's okay. Did say 2/3, but I mean, if by 2/3 you understand half, well, that's approximately 2/3. Really, I don't think so. But you are right that, I mean, this idea has been floated, and the reason it's been floated is the Obama people do have a whole bunch of treaties that aren't going to get 2/3. And to even get a few of them through, they really are going to have to, you know, sweat and pant and, I mean, kind of abase and humiliate themselves in front of Republican senators, right? And say, anthracite coal? I would do anything for anthracite coal. Yeah, what is it exactly? But yes, anything for your state, right?
They keep threatening to create the template with this reconciliation on the health care and pass it with 50.
You know, I wouldn't be at all confident that that will work either. Because people, I mean, this is really bad for senators. This is saying you used to be something important, now you're just a congressman. You know, with a more campaign financing needs. Well, we'll see. But I mean, look, this is another thing which, this is not in the Constitution, the filibuster, right? It's not in the Constitution. This is something that was made up. It was made up by senators, so the senators made it up, they could unmake it up. And the fact is it has been changed over time. They've never done away with it. And they've never done away with it because they've always understood it's what makes them senators. And if you start, you know, throwing off the things that make you a senator, you're going to end up like one of those pathetic Euro parliamentarians, right? You're going to end up nothing, just nothing. You're just like there to applaud. It's not worth it. You should stay in the plywood business, not get yourself elected to the Senate if that's all it is. So, sir.
Yeah, apropos treaties, can you talk a little bit more about the International Criminal Court? There's been rumors lately the Obama administration may sign on that again.
Whoa, great! No. You know, it needs 2/3 of the Senate. There's absolutely no way, none, zero, that this will get 2/3 of the Senate. Let me just tell you something inspirational. I was once at a conference with this guy who is chairman, organizer, or whatever he was, poobah of the American Coalition for the International Criminal Court. And I naively assumed that, you know, well, it's the American Coalition for the International Criminal Court, so he's out there saying, let's do it. No, he doesn't want to be humiliated. His program was, let's stop criticizing it so openly and give it a chance. Because he thought that was the best he could do. There's no way that is going through the Senate.
Well, the related thing, is there any consequence for them just signing, or that would be simply a...
It was signed. Oh, I see. I misunderstood you. Yes, it's true. Right? You all understand what he's referring to. President Clinton, at the end of this negotiation, said, we can't do this. And then, literally, his last weeks in office, it was like Christmas Eve of 2000, he said, okay, I'm signing this, but I don't want it to be ratified. It shouldn't be ratified. I'm just signing it just to say, like, I want to encourage you to do better in the future, right? He really did say, I'm signing it, but I'm just kidding. I mean, I'm not in favor of it, you know, because it's bad, and we can't do this, and I understand that. When Bush came into office, this was actually one of my few, you know, like moments of, ooh, someone consulted me. John Bolton said, what do you think is the right procedure for unsigning a treaty? We never unsigned a treaty before. He decided that the right procedure was send a letter to Kofi Annan. Take our name off the list. So, okay, so we unsigned. So now people are saying, you know, that was humiliating, that disgraced us in front of the French. And so in order to restore our French honor, we need to sign it, which is a very French thing to do, because we will be saying, you know, we're not, of course, going to go through with it, but just as a matter of style, you know. Here's our grand geste. You know, could that happen? Yes, that could happen. What does that signify? I believe nothing. I don't quite get what follows from that. I mean, some people have a legal argument that if you signed it, then you're obliged not to act in defiance of it, because that's under the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, which, by the way, we signed and didn't ratify. So is the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties binding on us in this particular? I don't know. But the truth is, I don't believe the Obama team is going to case by case worry about, oh, really, the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties? I mean, I think they're either going to go along with the court when they can and say no when they feel they have to, and I just don't believe this really hangs on whether they signed it. What are we talking about? Let me give you two examples. There was a UN resolution authorizing the court to take action against the criminal court against Sudan. This was like really stupid because what do you think that's going to do? And what it actually did was, of course, the prosecutor indicted the president of Sudan. Hurrah! But the guy, for some reason, refused to show up for trial in The Hague. But he did say, that's it. I'm kicking out all the international peacekeepers. You call me names, I'll show you what popularity is. So this was really stupid. Why did we vote for that resolution at the UN, giving them authority to do this? Because they weren't a signatory, so they had to be authorized even though they hadn't signed it. Answer, the Bush administration did it. Why did they do it? Because they wanted to say, hey, torture, this is a misunderstanding. We don't torture. We are friends. We want to be international. We want to be respectable. Please. Okay. So would the Obama team do the same? Of course they would, whether they signed or didn't sign. Now, there's something coming to the International Criminal Court. It's, news. The UN commissioned a report on Israeli war crimes in Gaza. They said, we want to have a report. They were totally war crimes, weren't they? And in outrage, weren't they? So they've now gotten the report. Yes, just like you said, yes. Okay, so the next move is the Security Council should authorize the International Criminal Court to prosecute, Israeli generals and, I don't know, the Prime Minister. He's already being prosecuted in Israel now, but still, not for war crimes. So get him to The Hague, right? Now, this can't happen unless the United States goes along. Are we going to go along? One reason why I think we are not going to go along is that one of the things they're angry about is, this UN committee that did this report is, ooh, you had targeted killings, airstrikes, you had like missiles and then people died. Okay, well, our missiles, our American missiles that did that were different because, we weren't firing them from a disputed territory like Israel was, we were firing them from Afghanistan, a country which, everyone knows it's okay to fire missiles from Afghanistan because it's mountainous. We weren't aiming at anything. They just happened to kill people. I don't know what our cover story is, why what we did is different from what they did. So, my assumption is that even the Obama team is not so crazy as to think we will pacify the UN by turning them on someone else, and we don't have to worry that this precedent will boomerang because the UN would never be hostile to us. I think to be that dumb, you had to be in the Bush administration. I don't think the Obama people do it. But again, even if they do it, what's really important is not, keep coming back to this, it's really important, there are no black helicopters. The International Criminal Court does not have even, what was his name, Barney Fife, the deputy? The older people know, right? They don't have even, like one drunken deputy to send out and say, please, would you come with me, right? The whole thing is voluntary. So all it is basically calling you names. So the question is, how intimidated are we going to be when they call us names? And, I kind of feel bad for Israel because there's so many people calling them names. But they have a lot of experience being called names. And if we, with 300 million people and 14 aircraft carriers, cannot deal with people calling us names, then we should sell the aircraft carriers because they're useless, right? We have to have enough self-confidence to say, oh yeah, well I think your indictment is criminal. I think you are a criminal. Ed Koch would have said that. You are a racist was what he always liked to say to people who called him racist. Sorry.
Just following up on that, as you may know, there's an investigation.
Wait, I'm sorry. How many people here know who was Ed Koch? 2. Wow.
Who's who?
It's really great to talk to young people. Ed Koch, the former mayor of New York, the angriest man ever to be mayor. Please. Before there was Giuliani, there was...
As you know, there's supposedly an investigation going on now in Afghanistan as to whether the United States and NATO troops have committed war
yes,
in the conflict
yes,
war.
yes,
This could,
yes,
be referred
yes,
over the International
yes,
Criminal Court,
yes,
plus Afghanistan
yes.
is a signatory to the agreement.
Yes, and we have to be prepared to say very loudly, you must be kidding. You must be kidding. We will not cooperate with this. We will not heed it. We are not listening to you. This is very, I mean, I can find your tapes. I mean, it's on YouTube, I'm sure. You know, I'm not listening. Doesn't matter what you say. Obama has to practice doing that, and if he thinks that's undignified, he should send out Hillary Clinton, who doesn't care about being undignified. And she can probably do that. We're not listening. And that's it. I mean, if we're not listening, what is it? Let's ask this question. Which country in the world is prepared to force the United States to change its fighting practices in Afghanistan? And I don't say that as like a ridiculous question. That's actually a serious question. Let's start with this. Who's now helping us that would withdraw? Well, no one's helping us, so you don't have to worry about that. Hardly anyone is helping us. I mean, the British are helping us. And they're doing it now very, very, you know, reluctantly. Okay, well, that's one leverage point, kind of small. Next, are the French prepared to slap a tariff on, I don't know, Apple computers? If they do, they will not sell any more wine or cheese in America. And I know from being in a university faculty that people import a lot of French wine now. I mean, they're not going to actually accept economic costs to themselves to try to enforce the opinion of these judges of the International Criminal Court. So if they're not prepared to like accept some economic cost to do it, what are we talking about? We're talking about indignant editorials in Le Monde. They never bother me. Has anyone here ever been bothered by it? No, I mean, you just say, alors, c'est la vie. I mean, I don't mean to completely shrug this off since I gave a talk saying we ought to be worried about this, but what we ought to be worried about is letting ourselves be rattled. It would have been better, it would have been much better if the Clinton administration had had the sense to realize that this whole project was a risky thing from which no good could possibly come that would compensate the potential harm that it would do. And they should have known that. It's called the International Criminal Court. International, it's right there. That's its first name. What do you think comes out of that? I'm not saying it as a joke. I mean, like, what good things have come out of the General Assembly in 60 years? What were you thinking? And the answer is, oh, well, I thought it would be different. Okay, so you're wrong. So can we not do this again? And the answer is, well, it's hard. Okay, fine. So if you have trouble saying no, then when they do something and say, well, you're bad, that's, later on you have to say no. At some point you have to say no. And it gets harder to say no, at least to say it in a confident way when you're out of practice. Right? I'll do what I always do in class, which is I'll just call on people. You, sir, in the back.
Do you think the Sea Treaty has any...
The law of the Sea Treaty. Yes?
Do you think it has any chance of passing the House or Senate?
It only needs to pass the Senate. That's in the Constitution. Yeah, it does have a chance because it's so boring. It's so boring. And it's been out there for... This started in 1982. So that's like 25 years. And somehow there's like this statute of limitations on objections to boring treaties. You know, after you repeat them and repeat them and repeat them for 25 years, half the senators are... that one, I think there is... I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it failed, but I think that that is, if you like look at the roster of treaties that people like me are worried about, that's one that very well might go through because I believe people are misrepresenting it. But it's not even the treaty that bothers me. It's how we would respond when what I'm warning about actually happens. And they say, oh, wait a minute, you can't have American ships seizing pirates. That's wrong. The pirates are protected under the treaty, Article 3, blah, 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 you know. And at that point, we have to say, no, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. We didn't understand that it was this. So if this is what it is, we're out of here. We have to be able to say that very confidently. And I'm afraid we will not say that. I mean, we were like, oh, well, really? I mean, you know, they were pirates. They had a little black patch, you know, over the eye. Waving a sword and everything, the skull and crossbones. I mean, didn't you? Come on. Long John something, he said was his name. I mean, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea is never going to be in charge of the United States Navy. It just isn't. But it does worry me that already there are all these Navy lawyers, and I know this from experience, you know, saying, well, of course the